It was nearly 3:03 a.m. when my phone buzzed, lighting up my dark room. I'd been half asleep, only moments from dozing off. At first, I thought it was just a spam call. But then I saw the name. Jess. I sat up, heart pounding, staring at the screen. My sister Jess died in a car accident 3 years ago. She was only 22 when it happened. The police said she likely lost control of her car in the rain and veered off the road into a ravine. Afterward, there were no signs of anyone else involved, and no one suspected anything more sinister. It was ruled an accident, and that was that. The hardest part was how sudden it was. She was gone, just like that. So, you can understand why seeing her name flash across my phone in the dead of night sent chills through me. I didn't answer it. I couldn't. I told myself it had to be some kind of technical error or a bizarre prank. But the image of her name, glowing in the dark, stuck with me. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, I shrugged it off, convincing myself it was just a glitch. I mean, weird things happen with phones all the time, right? But then, the next night, at exactly 3:03 a.m., my phone rang again. Same number. Same name, Jess. This time, fear and curiosity battled within me. I wanted to answer but froze, staring at the screen until it stopped ringing. Every night after that, the call would come at 3:03 a.m., right on time. The hair on the back of my neck would stand on end, my hand hovering over the answer button, yet I'd never press it. The whole thing felt wrong. After a week, I told my mom about it. I didn't want to freak her out, but I had to tell someone. We sat at her kitchen table, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence as I explained what had been happening. Her face paled, but she tried to brush it off, saying it was likely a glitch or some kind of mistake with the phone records. "She's gone, honey," she whispered, placing a gentle hand over mine. Maybe it's just your mind playing tricks on you." Her voice shook, and her eyes darted away as she spoke, like she couldn't bear to confront the possibility of what I was telling her. That night, I decided to answer. I lay in bed, watching the clock as it ticked closer to 3:03 a.m. When the phone rang, I swallowed my fear and pressed answer. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. Silence stretched out on the other end, followed by a faint crackling. Then, I heard it, soft breathing, shallow, like someone who was barely there. My throat tightened. "Jess?" I whispered, hating how hopeful I sounded. The line went dead. The next morning, I felt like I'd dreamed the whole thing. I tried to shake it off, even going to work and pretending everything was normal. But the sleepless nights were catching up to me, and I could feel my grip on reality slipping. Each night, the calls came, and each night I answered, my heart hammering. The silence on the other end was almost worse than the words that would sometimes follow. Some nights, I'd hear faint whispers, soft but unmistakable. "Help me. I need you. Come to me." Her voice was barely audible, like she was speaking from the other side of a wall. But the desperation in her tone made my skin crawl. I tried to ignore it, to pretend it wasn't real, but how could I ignore my sister's voice, pleading with me? One night, the call changed. I answered, and this time, her voice was clear, urgent, the words sharp and filled with something I couldn't quite place. "Come to me," she said, her tone commanding yet filled with sorrow. It was Jess's voice, no doubt. I didn't understand it, but I felt compelled to follow it. The next morning, I found myself packing a bag, not sure where I was going, but knowing I had to go somewhere. I couldn't explain it, even to myself. All I knew was that I needed to drive. Hours passed, the road stretching endlessly, my mind drifting back to memories of Jess, the way she laughed, her favorite songs, the last conversation we'd had. Everything felt blurred, like I was walking through a dream. Eventually, I found myself near the ravine where Jess had crashed. The place looked like it had been frozen in time, with her car half buried under leaves and branches. My heart pounded as I approached, my footsteps slow and hesitant. The car should have been towed away long ago, but there it was, rusted and broken, the windows shattered, a piece of her hairbrush still lying on the dashboard. I felt like I was intruding, stepping into something that was both familiar and completely wrong. I peered into the front seat, half expecting to see nothing but remnants of an old tragedy. But then I saw her. Jess sat there, her face pale and expressionless, her eyes dull and empty. She looked up at me, her lips parting slightly in what might have been a plea, her hand reaching out in a trembling motion. "Come with me," she whispered, her voice soft, filled with a kind of sadness that went straight through me. My blood turned to ice. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet felt like they were rooted to the ground. I took a step back, and her hand reached out further, her voice more insistent. "Please, come with me." Her words echoed in my head, and for a moment, I felt myself moving toward her, caught in the pull of her voice. But then something snapped, and I stumbled backward, my body finally responding. I turned and ran, not stopping until I reached my car, my breath coming in gasps, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my keys. As I drove away, I couldn't bring myself to look in the rearview mirror, terrified of what I might see. The calls stopped after that night. I didn't tell anyone about what I'd seen, I couldn't bear to relive it. But every night, I found myself waking up at exactly 3:03 a.m., my pulse racing, half expecting the phone to ring. And sometimes, in the stillness of the night, I hear her voice, faint and distant, whispering from somewhere beyond my reach. She's still waiting for me, still calling, and I don't think she'll ever stop.